Is Keir Starmer going to open up his 10-bedroom mansion and allow homeless people to live in his house because of decisions that they have made? Will Labour ever get anything right? The government want to help renters. And the truth is, renters do need a lot of help, especially in the UK property market. But it's absolutely absurd. It's like they've gone to the pub, they've sat down, had a couple of beers and said, let's think of a way that we can pretend to help tenants. So the government's latest plan to ban landlords from charging tenants 3 months, 6 months rent up front, it might seem like an attempt to introduce some level of fairness into the property rental market, but the reality is, I think it does much more damage than good. So the policy is designed to help renters. That's what they say. But the government say it's unfair for landlords to demand upfront payment when most people can't afford it. And they are correct. But unfortunately, this isn't about fairness. It's about survival for both the tenants and the landlords. Landlords don't just wake up and say, hey, I feel like charging a tenant 3 months rent or 6 months rent. Based on my analysis as both a tenant and a landlord, I think this decision could make things worse for tenants. Many landlords only ask for a 6-month rent payment up front to reduce the risk. Now, I know you might not care about the landlord's risk because you say, well, it's an investment and it carries risk, which is fine. But a landlord that has responsibilities, meaning a mortgage, a large mortgage over their head, which if the mortgage isn't paid could lead to repossessions and could lead to bankruptcy. So it's all about risk for the landlord. If a tenant doesn't meet the referencing criteria, it means they don't meet the income criteria, the credit criteria, then paying 3 or 6 months rent up front could be the difference between having a roof over their head and not having a roof over their head. Now, I want to say this. Our UK government spend all their time working and creating policies that are not dealing with the real issues that are affecting most tenants. Most tenants are not paying 3 months or 6 months rent up front. It's still a lot of people, but it's not the vast majority. The vast majority that can pass the income criteria, that can pass the credit criteria, do not have to face a 3 month or 6 month rent up front payment. It's typically for the people that have low credit or low income. And as a landlord that has to protect their asset, the only way that they can do so to mitigate and reduce risk is to charge 3 months or 6 months rent up front. So what do we do when the only way to pretty much guarantee that your investment will be looked after in terms of you have some money to make your contributions and your mortgage payments, and the only way to do that is to charge a handful of people 3 months rent and 6 months rent up front? What happens when that's removed? Where does that put those tenants that can only get access to housing and accommodation by paying 3 months or 6 months rent up front because they can't pass the income criteria or the credit criteria? But we're not taking into consideration some of the members of society, some of the renters that are already vulnerable. So there are people who are on benefits, there are people who are self-employed, there are people with bad credit history who will not pass the traditional referencing checks to rent a property. So what happens to them? And where do they go if they can't get access to housing? Well, it becomes a greater burden for the state, which in turn means higher taxes for the average person. So sometimes when your government scream and shout and they pretend that they are helping, let's start looking under the bonnet and realizing that it's just to placate you and to make you feel like they are doing something, when in reality, this policy right here on paper sounds great, but in reality, it causes more issues and more damage to those who are vulnerable. But let's be honest here. The next stop on this train of disaster is homelessness. If the only way some people could get access to renting property and access to housing was to pay 3 months or 6 months rent up front, and that's been removed and landlords can no longer do so, even if it was for self-protection, what the heck happens next? Is Keir Starmer going to open up his 10-bedroom mansion and allow homeless people to live in his house because of decisions that they have made? Is Rachel Reeves going to open up her spare bedroom and say, hey, I know you can't rent a property the traditional way because you have a low income or you've got adverse credit, and now we've removed the only way in which you could rent a property, which gives the landlord some security. Hey, welcome, come into my house. But they're not going to do that. The UK already has a serious homelessness issue. This policy will push more families into issues and crisis. Families that are barely surviving, barely holding on, now have nowhere to go. Rachel Reeves, will you allow them to rent your spare room? Keir Starmer, will you allow the people you're about to make homeless rent your spare room? Because we are about to see a number of people become homeless because you thought it would be a great idea to penalise landlords. Look, this isn't fear-mongering, it's the reality. If you don't have a perfect credit score, if you don't have a high income, if you're not a perfect tenant, then there is a likely chance that you will struggle to rent a property. So where does that put you? I'm all up for governmental policy, reform, governmental interventions in the property market. It is needed. This is not what was needed. Going forward, landlords will demand that you have a perfect credit score and potentially a very high income. So where does that leave those who don't have a perfect credit score and a low income? Where does that leave those who are self-employed, which is millions of people in the UK? Many landlords will just exit the market, and many people will say if they can't rent their property or they can't find good quality tenants, then they're just going to exit the market. They're going to sell up and disappear, which causes a greater property issue. Rents will increase because there are less properties available on the market. So who really wins when our government introduce these placebo policies? Policies that feel on paper as if it's designed to help you, when in reality, it's actually a disadvantage. It feels great to say landlords are being penalised, but landlords only charge 3 months or 6 months rent up front when you have a tenant that doesn't fit the standard referencing criteria. Oh, the government didn't tell you that part. They just said, hey, here's a blow against landlords. Here's a benefit to tenants. Well, the truth is it's not. I had a tenant once, lovely American couple, just moved to the UK, studying near a university. They loved the property. I liked them. The wife was an artist. Great couple. But unfortunately, they couldn't pass referencing. And I had to take the gamble to say, I don't know whether you will be able to pay the rent on time because I have no history. I have no data to prove to myself as an investor and a landlord that you will be able to make your monthly commitments. And they suggested, we really want this property. It's round the corner from where I'm studying. It's a great property. Can we pay 6 months rent upfront to secure this property? The problem here is it's indicated that landlords charge 3 months and 6 months rent upfront because they're evil and they want that money to pay for their Lamborghini finance. But that's not the case. So who really wins here? Because it's not the tenants, it's not the landlords. Oh, well, of course, Labour wins because it looks like they're doing something for tenants. But if I'm to be fair in this, I say no one wins. The people involved in this boxing match, in this forever frantic dance of tenants versus landlords, well, tenants lose out and landlords lose out. We leave people on the edge of potentially losing their homes or losing shelter and security under the illusion of trying to help them. The government said it's all about making renting fairer, but fairness means nothing if people end up sleeping rough or becoming homeless. Fairness means nothing if people can't get shelter because they've got a low income or bad credit. Policies like this treats the symptom but not the disease. The real problem, which they still refuse to deal with, is the lack of affordable housing. So we can run around in circles, blaming this person, blaming that person. Landlords are blaming tenants, tenants are blaming landlords. But the reality is, we've got to come together and focus our attention on the inability of our government to build enough houses. It's until they start building enough homes, it's like sticking a plaster on a gaping wound rather than going to the hospital. We've got to start having these real conversations so that we can come up with policies that truly benefit everyone, as opposed to trying to alienate people but cause more damage. Hey guys, if you get any value from this video, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, even if you think I'm wrong.